Hello knitters and friends, welcome to episode 16 of the Seedling Stitch Knitting Podcast. My name is Athena and I am a knitter, an aspiring knitwear designer and a PhD student in mechanical engineering coming to you from Vancouver, Canada. And this little podcast is my corner on the YouTube where I chat everything about knitting. I talk about the knitting projects I do and the tips and tricks that I learn along the way. And I'd also like to chat about my design ideas and how I develop them into a full pattern. And today we have a very special guest, LuLu Little Bunny, and she is one of the finished objects in the past week, along with some other finished objects that I'll talk about in this episode. And I also have some whips and new design ideas to chat about. And this episode will also be my 1K giveaway episode. We have reached 1,000 subscribers in the past 2 weeks or so, and I'm very thrilled and very grateful for all of you who decided to spend time with me and follow along my knitting journey. And this really enables me to do more knitting content creation. It means a lot to me. So as a thank you, I have prepared some giveaway gift, and I will announce more details on that at the end of this episode. So thank you for taking the time to knit with me or just relax and hang out. So please grab your knitting and your snacks or drinks and let's get started with today's episode. So we will start by what I am wearing. If you have watched my last episode, I talked everything about this Fir Hat vest. This is a design coming from a Japanese designer, Kobo, also known as Yoko Hata, from one of her knitting book, Fir Hat Knitting. And this is one of the Fir Hat vest design in this book. So this is the first full-on Fir Hat garment that I have ever made, and it was also the first time that I sticks, which means like cutting through these, and I actually recorded the process of my sticking in my last episode, and also talk a lot about some of the details of how to do the sticking, prepare for the sticking, and finish off to make the sticking edge neat. And if you're interested in more of the technical points of this Fir Hat vest, you can look at my last episode if you haven't. And today it will just be more like a showing off of this full finished garment. I think last time I left on a sticking edge on one of the armholes, so after last episode I have finished knitting the rib for one of the armhole, and I have washed and blocked the whole garment. And now let me show you the full project. I really love how that turned out, especially after the wash and the blocking. This vest was knitted with the Shetland Spindrift yarn, and I think the wash and blocking really made a difference on this knitted fabric. So before that I have steam blocked that, and it has made the fabric flat for some level, but after the wash and the blocking, this whole fabric really turned very flat, and the little fluff came out, and the colors sort of blend in and become more integrated. So I really love the effect of the wet blocking. In the Fir Hat knitting book, the author mentioned that like nowadays the quality of the Shetland wool yarn are really high, and usually a steam block would be fine, but I still recommend you just wet block it for once. And I think the difference that the wet blocking made is really marvelous. So I knitted this vest for my PhD defense, which will be happening next month on November 15th, and it will actually be one day before my 30th birthday. My birthday is on November 16th, so that was really good timing, and I finished knitting this one and I'm going to wear this one on my PhD defense. I've said that in the podcast many times. And I bought this shirt to match with the vest last weekend because I hadn't owned a good shirt to match with these things, and I have actually managed to find the original styling for this vest. So this vest design was published both on this Fir Hat knitting book and on a Japanese magazine called the Keito-dama, which literally translates to like yarn skein or yarn ball in Japanese, and it is like the Land magazine or Pom magazine in Japan, and they publish a lot of nice knitting and crochet patterns every season. And I found there was a styling photo in that version of the magazine. I'll pop a picture here, and it was really beautiful and colorful. The model wears a yellow shirt and a forest green skirt, but I think for my formal PhD defense kind of occasion I cannot wear that brightly, so I just found a nice white shirt. I got this from Muji, which was also a Japanese brand, not advertised, but I'm really happy with the look of this shirt and the overall effect. So I think I'm more than ready for defending my thesis and get done with my PhD and getting started with my knitting career after that. And in my last episode, I mentioned a technique that I used to bind off these double rib edges with a crochet hook slip stitch, and I have filmed a video while doing that, so I will put that little video here. It is the same result as if you are just binding off with the knitting needle and like pass one over, but with a crochet hook it's much faster, and you sort of just treat this crochet hook as a knitting needle, and you knit 2 stitches and like purl 2 stitches using this crochet hook, and use the slip stitch instead of like passing a stitch over the previous stitch to bind off your stitches. It's just with the hook it's much easier to grab one loop through the other loop, whereas with knitting needles, if you want to pass over, you have to do that with the help of your left needle, but with the crochet hook you can just pull that loop through. And I hope that's useful, and it's something it's just a little technique that you could try. And we will move on to my next finished object or finished creature. This is my LuLu little bunny. And this is a design by Ekaterina Popova, also known as the Lovely Knit Creation on Instagram. If you have been with me for a while, you know that I love knitting animal friends, and I am actually running a knit along, the Animal Friend knit along on Ravelry as well as on Instagram. I think I started that a couple episodes ago, maybe in episode 12. I'll pop up a link there if you're interested. And this is just a knit along that allows you to knit these animal friend, animal doll, plushie sort of patterns with me, and you can share your progress on Ravelry group or Instagram with the hashtag #AnimalFriendCall so that we can knit together. It's always nice to have some other people knitting similar things with you and get inspired and maybe get you through some difficult points of these little lovely creatures. And I'm running this knit along until Christmas, in the hope that maybe you will knit these as a gift for some of your friends or family. I think these are very nice gift knitting, as well as if you just want to knit these things for yourself like I do, then that's really nice too. And I also have a prize for that, which will be an animal doll sweater book in Japanese. I have more info on that in my previous episodes, and as well as the pinned post in my Ravelry group, so you can check on that. And we'll just talk more about LuLu. So LuLu is my own entry for my own knit along. And LuLu was really a fast knit and a really cute small little bunny. I think I started knitting LuLu 2 weeks ago, and I finished knitting LuLu including the body and the little dress and the hairband within 1 week. I think less than 1 week. I did knit this monotonously, but it was quite fun. And all these parts are really small, and before you know it, you finish knitting a leg or finish knitting an arm, so it was never boring. Previously, I have knitted some other bigger animals, like if you have seen, I have the Tilly hare from the book Knitted Animal Friends by Louise Crowther, and I also have there, you see, a long-legged sloth, which was adapted from the owl from the book as well. And these animals took much longer, probably like a month to finish. And I think compared to little LuLu bunny, I think LuLu is cuter, don't you think? I actually just put these 3 animals together. I'll pop a picture there. They really look like a family, like a mom, dad, and a baby LuLu bunny, and they look really cute together. And they do have some similar facial expression. Their heads are leaning to the same direction for some reason. And in the pattern of the LuLu little bunny, the designer wrote something like, for each knitted animal, the maker actually inserted some of their soul into the project, and I think that might be true. I think I do insert some of my own personalities into these little creatures. And let me talk more about the technical details of making LuLu. So this pattern, the designer provided 2 options. You have the knitting in the round option as well as the knitting in the flat option. So compared to these bigger animals from the book, they only offer knitting in the flat option and then sewing together in the book. I don't hate the sewing, but if you can avoid it, it means you can do less work. So this time I tried the knitting in the round option, and that was really efficient. And all the parts are knitted in the round, and then you just sort of insert the filling as well as knitting, so you don't need to sew them afterwards. And I really enjoyed the process. But the only question I had was, then there's no step of blocking. Like when I was knitting in the flat, after I knitted a piece, I usually wash and block them. But with the knitting in the round, since I've already pushed the filling in, then if I have to wash and block them, then I can only wash the whole thing, including the filling, and I just don't want to do that. So if you have some solution on that, like can I maybe steam block it? Maybe that will help, but this is also like a 3-dimensional surface. I don't really know how you can steam block it with, say, like an iron. But anyway, I think without blocking, the LuLu's body also looks nice. And for this yarn, for the body, I used the Sheepy's Stone Wash yarn. This is the yarn label in the colorway Moonstone. And I used this yarn for the body of my other animals. So I know that just from my previous experiences, blocking doesn't really make much of a difference for this yarn. So I'm not too bothered by that. I cannot wet block it right away. And for the filling, I used both the IKEA pillow, so I bought a $5 IKEA pillow and just used the polyester filling from the pillow, and it was really a cheap option to do, so highly recommend it. And as well as some of and I also used some of my this Fir Hat vest trimmings to fill in LuLu's little bunny. I'll pop a picture here while I was doing the filling. So in LuLu bunny's little belly, there are a lot of colorful Fir Hat trimmings, since I was do the sticking along here, and there were a few stitches that will be just cut off and discarded. So I have a lot of colorful Fir Hat trimmings, and they make really good fillings for these knitted animals. And I always save my yarn tips while I was knitting random other projects. So I have a jar of them, and I just push all of them into LuLu's little belly. And I do worry a little bit that I don't want those colorful things to show through the white part of LuLu, so I push them into the belly, but I don't think they show through a lot. You might be seeing some darker colors. And for the arms, legs, and the head, I just use the regular white fillings from the $5 IKEA pillow. And the yarn for the little dress and the hairband is Hostgarn Coast in the colorway powder. I had some of these in stash when I was making my cherry blossom cows a while ago, and I just have some left over from that project, and I think it's a really cute color for little LuLu. I held 2 strands of Hostgarn Coast together, and I followed the recommended needle size as the pattern, which was 2.75mm needle. And the yarn I used was different than the recommended. I think the yarn required by the pattern was something from Sadness Garn, and it has been discontinued. So now probably you can only knit this pattern with some yarn substitution, which was totally fine. The stone washed is a sports weight yarn, and the Hostgarn Coast is a light fingering weight yarn, and I held 2 strands together. I think with this yarn, my gauge was tighter. I didn't calculate because it didn't really affect much, but I think the finished size of my LuLu Little Bunny was much smaller than the pattern directed. The pattern said the finished rabbit will be 20 centimeter high, and my LuLu Little Bunny is only 18 centimeter, even if she is standing. So I think smaller is cuter. And she had a little tail. She is small, but she has everything. For LuLu's little dress and hairband, they were knitted in the flat, and there were some button band. I found these buttons that are the same color as this powder yarn, and I think they work really well. And I have these 2 little green buttons, and I think it matches these powder pink color really well for little LuLu. I had these small green button for my Charlotte the Fox, which I talked about in my episode 10 or something. I'll pop a link up above there. And I used this green button for Charlotte's linen stitch coat, and I have a few other left to use here as a decorative button for little LuLu. And the hardest part for this pattern, I think, is to make the perfect facial expression. And I think this is true for all the other animals I have knitted. So I always had to sew the eyes and the nose, embroider these little parts several times. I think for little LuLu, I probably did the eye and the nose and mouth for probably 3 to 4 times. And it was also hard to assemble these body parts together, especially for the head. This little head ball was knitted, I think, starting from the mouth part and bind off at this part. So the neck was actually connected through a middle part of this ball, and you really have to find the correct position to connect the neck so that the head is sitting in the right orientation on the body. So the pattern gives you a lot of photos to show you how to attach the head correctly, and you really have to observe those photos to see to find the correct orientation to mount the hat into the body. I think I did assemble the hat to the body for 3 times as well, and also the ear position was also hard to get. And I think at the end I was sort of like counting stitches on the photos. Like on the photo you can see how many photos away from the center that you mount these little ears. You can also see from the photo that how many stitches these nose embroider lines last, and you basically match everything with that. So for these little eyes, in the pattern they use those like plastic safety eyes, but I don't have those, and I don't think my local yarn shop has those in stock as well. It requires the really small safety eyes, like 6 millimeters. So instead, I just embroidered the little eyes. So I could probably show you these details. I just found a black fingering weight yarn, and I embroider like a V onto the eye, and then I just thread the yarn around the V for like 3 times and then pull back. So I just have this little eye here, as well as there's like 2 lines of little eyelashes, maybe you could see. And I sew these 2 eyes with the same thread of fingering weight yarn so that I could pull them together, and the eyes will be just a little bit indented into the body, so that looks nice too. And for the little nose, I used the sewing thread. I held 3 strands of sewing threads together, so it's just not too thin or not too thick. And in the original pattern, it only asks you to sew these 3 lines, like the little nose and this little vertical line for the mouth, but I added this little line just to work as a smile. And she also looked the same as my Tilly hair, and I think just with this little smile, all these animals looks cuter. And you can copy this facial expression if you like that. So I think it's really worth it to spend more time and more heart on getting the facial expressions cutest for your knitted animals, because you've already spent a lot of time on knitting all the parts, and if they don't have the cutest smile, you won't love them as much as if they are the cutest. Anyway. So apart from the facial expression, another thing I really like about this pattern is the leg construction. I'll show you. These legs are attached to the body with this button, and there is the thread goes through these buttons together, and with this construction the legs are totally rotatable, so that the little animal could be stand as this, as well as sitting in a comfortable position like this. And I have not seen this sort of leg construction in other popular animal friend designs. Usually they are sewed to the body, like here for Tilly. For Tilly, it's okay because she had really long legs and you can put them whichever way you want. But for some of the other cuter animal designs, they usually have short legs, and then if you just sew the leg to the body, then the animal can only be standing. And also, this is easier to do. You just sew the legs to the body as if you are sewing a button to a shirt. Whereas if you are just sewing the leg fully to the body, then you have to do some like mattress stitch or something around the whole area of the leg, and that is more work. So I'm really drawn to this leg construction, and I think it's really smart. And I found that this designer, she also had some other animals like a bear, a Christmas bear, and something else. And I'm really interested in trying those. They use the same leg construction, so I really enjoyed her pattern, highly recommend it, and I think I might be knitting one of her bears at some point. I know there are a few other bear options like the Mary Jane Tea Room bears, the Good Bear. A Little Cotton Rabbits also had a bear design, but I see through those pictures, their leg construction are more of the conventional where it just attached to the body. And I think I enjoy these kind of mechanical rotatable design, and I would like to try one of the bear patterns at some point in the future. Another techniques that I learned from making this pattern is some increases. For this pattern, the designer didn't use any of the common increases that I have learned. Like usually I would use the make one left and make one right, where you pick up the bar between two stitches and knit into the back loop, or pick up the bar from the back and knit into that loop. But for this pattern, the designer used the KLL, which was knit lower left, which was used for like here. And also she used the make one away, which was abbreviated as M1A. And if you haven't seen those increases, the make one away works the same as the backward loop cast on. You just like make a loop with your index finger and put that loop into the needle, and that's all that is. And the make one towards is also like making a loop, but it's a different orientation than the make one away, and you just put that loop onto your needle. And I found that this increase is almost the same effect as the make one left and make one right, and the only difference is that, for example, for the make one left, you pick up the bar and knit into that, whereas in make one away, you created that bar. You basically, without picking up the bar in the next row, so you already created this bar with this backward loop cast on-ish method, and you prepared that bar into your right needle, and then when you're knitting the next row, you just knit into that prepared bar already without having to pick up a bar between those two stitches. For the make one left, the normal increases, when you are picking up a bar, you are making the two stitches around that bar tighter. And if you are doing a lot of increases along one row, you will be pulling a lot of stitches around those row very tight. And sometimes for example, with this Tilly rabbit design, you have to do a lot of increases on some of the lower rows, for example, as you are knitting the neck. And that could be a problem for me, because that row will just become super tight. And at some point, like when you are knitting here, you have to do the increases around a middle line, and then at some point those stitches just become too tight that you can almost not pick up a bar between two stitches. However, if you are using the make one away and make one towards, you don't have to pick up a bar from two stitches. You are already just adding that extra bar between those stitches, so you have a bit more room to work with for your increase, and it won't cause your fabric to pucker locally. And I think it's really neat. Like if you are doing a lot of increases in some area, I think here she also used the make one away or make one towards to make this extra fabric on the lower part of the dress. And if you want to know the substitution, the make one away works similar as the make one left, and the make one towards works similarly as the make one right. So that's their like right leaning or left leaning kind of orientation. That being said, it doesn't mean that make one away is superior than make one left. It is more useful on the occasion where you're doing a lot of increases, and if using make one left, it will make the increase too tight. However, if you are like knitting a raglan sleeve, you can probably still use the make one left, because the make one away it might be too loose for you, and it might leave a small hole locally. Like also for example, on the toe, if you're doing some increases around your wedge toe, for example, you would probably still want to use the make one left and make one right, because you don't want any extra room or extra space on the toe, and your increase around the toe is not that aggressive. So I think the rule of thumb would be that if you are doing a lot of increases along one row, like doing it very aggressively, you might want to try the make one away or the make one towards. Or if you are knitting with a tighter gauge, like a smaller needle, then it's just easier to do the make one away. And if you're knitting with a tight gauge, it won't show you any hole. But if you are knitting with a looser gauge with larger needles and you don't want to have any like little holes in your fabric, you may wish to use the regular left slanted, like the make one left or make one right, with picking up bars between stitches. So that's just me getting a little bit nerdy when I learn new knitting techniques. So I think that's everything about LuLu, and I will move on to my next finished object. The next one I have is my pine and fir hat. This is my own design, and it is those like Aran cable kind of hat design. And previously I wanted to call it evergreen hat because it is inspired by the pine and fir, all the other evergreen trees that I love in winter. But I found there are already a lot of evergreen hat, evergreen beanie, that sort of pattern on Ravelry, so I don't want to use the same name. So I decided to call it pine and fir hat because these two cable patterns, this one is a pine with little pine cones with these bubbles. These are pine cones. And this major pattern is supposed to be a fir tree. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's like a growing fir tree coming to the top. And since last time, I have redesigned the crown a little bit just so that it's decreasing in the rate that I like. And this is my first hat design. And the part I like most about my design is that I have this continuous cable pattern, a small cable pattern that runs through the folded brim up to the top. And the whole hat was knitted in the round. So here you are actually knitting while treating the wrong side as the right side because this will be folded, and you are actually doing some of these cables on the wrong side, like the purl over purl kind of cabling, just so that like when you are knitting the main part, you don't have to flip your work. And since last time I have written the pattern out, I have figured how to chart these sort of complicated cables. I'm still using the knitting chart app on iPhone or iPad, and I was able to chart like the crown decrease as well. There is a symbol like for no stitch. Before I didn't know that, and I only know that I could just do a chart with like a rectangle or on a square kind of grid, but now I can draw these charts where with some decrease there are fewer and fewer stitches until you reach the top. And this pattern is currently being tested. For this version, I used the Hostgarn Coast in colorway charcoal. And my testers, they are using other Hostgarn yarn, I think super soft, and they are using maybe Cascade, and also Jamieson's Shetland with the color dark green, and I really look forward to seeing their version. And if you're interested in seeing their work, you can follow my Instagram SD_Athena. I'll share their work, and also I've created the pine and fir hat hashtag to share everything about the progress of this hat. And I think I should be able to publish the pattern by the end of October or at least early November before my next podcast episode release. So stay tuned if you're interested in knitting some hat pattern like this. And I have all these details written in my project page, which I will link in the description below. And you can check on that if you're interested. So moving on to the next finished object is a pair of socks that I made for my husband. So this is my own sock and this is his sock. His socks are so big. They're just so big. And these are knitted with this yarn, flawed sock, fruit something. I'm not going to pronounce that. And this is a series of self-patterning yarn from Germany. And they have the fruit themes and I'm using the kiwi fruit theme. And it is a cotton-based yarn. And it feels really different from the other, like the wool polyamide kind of socks yarn. And I do enjoy it. The fabric is a bit stiff. It feels more breathable. It feels less warm than the wool type of yarn, which I think is good, especially for my husband because his feet sweats more easily. And I think with the cotton yarn, it's less scratchy, it's more breathable. And he has tried these on and he's enjoying them. The pattern I used was my own no frills toe up socks. It's a free pattern on Ravelry, so feel free to check on that. I knitted the largest size for him on 2.5mm needles, so each round around the foot was 64 stitches. And I did make some modification than the pattern. One was that for the toe increase, instead of 2 stitches around the increases, I made 4 stitches around the increase. And I think that can just make the toe a little bit thicker, and I think that will make a better fit for his thicker foot. It's really just a very small detail. And also I added an extra round of increase on the gusset. In my pattern there were 11 rounds of gusset increases and I just did 12 here. And another difference was the heel. So in the pattern I used a slip stitch heel, and this is a staggered slip stitch. So which means that in row 1 you knit, slip, and in row 3 you slip, knit. And what else? And on the cuff I used a 2mm needle. So I reduced the needle size on the cuff just so that it fits his ankle a little bit better. This is probably the first thing I've ever knitted for my husband. Oh no, also the hat was knitted for him as well. But it fits me as well. It fits his hat as well as my own hat, so we'll probably share the hat. But this sock will only be for him because it's huge, too huge for me. So I used 60 grams of the main colored yarn for the sock, and I used 40 color of the kiwi sock for my own sock, and it was a 100-gram ball, and I only have this much left. So I'm very happy with the usage of the yarn. I think it only left like 1 pattern repeat for this self-patterning yarn. I don't know what to do with them. Maybe like knitting some little sock for my LuLu bunny or for some of the other animals that I have knitted. So that's the sock. That's all the finished object that I have. The next I will talk about my whips. After I finished my Fir Hat vest, which has been like a super difficult, time-consuming project for me, I sort of had a cast-on party and casted on a lot of things that I wanted to work on. And the first whip is a Fir Hat beret hat, and I've only knitted this much. And this hat also comes from the Fir Hat knitting book. This is the beret, and I'm adapting from this bluish one, but I'm not going to use the same color because I had a lot of leftover yarn from this Fir Hat vest, so I will just use whatever color I have with these, and then I can have a matching like beret hat. For this little beret hat, you cast on above these corrugated rib and you knit above and do the decreases. I think this like flower kind of top is really beautiful, and I'm looking forward to knitting that. And after that, you will pick up some stitches around your cast on edge and then knit the corrugated rib. I think that's the instruction of the design. And I had to decide how I'm going to swap these colorways, and I had a few options. I could like swap this darker red color with my with this purple color, or I could swap these red color with like this yellow color that I had. To decide on which color to swap with, I have actually drew a few things with my color pencil, and I think the yellow version looks a bit better than the purple, so I'm going to go with that. That's just a little tip for you, like if you are deciding on some colorways apart from swatching with the yarn, you can also draw with a color pencil or a watercolor or acrylic color to just see how this idea would turn out. And another thing I casted on was something from this Sandnesgar magazine. So this is Sandnesgar MYKT-TIL-DAME 2202, and I casted on one of this design, which is the Amy Slipover. If you have watched Inga from Knitting Traditions, she had knitted this with, I think, Newton yarn held with some mohair. I have been wanting to cast on this pattern for a while, and I decided to cast on with my grandma's yarn, and I've only knitted this little, so there's really not much to see. But I want to chat about this yarn. If you're new here, I have this little story about my grandma's gifted yarn. When she learned that I'm addicted to knitting, she gifted me a lot of her own stash yarns, and this ball of like sage green yarn was one of them. And I really like this color, and this is about a sweater quantity. I think this yarn is probably a reused yarn. It feels like a woolen yarn, and it's a little bit whirly, so I think it was probably knitted to something but then ripped off, and it probably had been washed a little bit, but the whirling, the little twist on the yarn still exists a little bit. And previously I have decided to use this yarn to knit something else. I have found this pattern, which is like a round yoke Fir Hat cardigan from the Fir Hat knitting book, and yeah, I just thought I could knit this with my grandma's yarn. And I have actually knitted a lot. I have knitted these much. So the lower part of the cardigan was knitted in the flat, and these are the two front lower panels. These were knitted painstakingly with 2.5mm needles and in the flat, so like knitting and purling to make all of these. But after I get my hand on this true Shetland wool yarn, I feel that this is really no comparison to this, and I don't think this will work with like a beautiful round yoke. And you can see the little twist on this fabric still exists, and the stitches are really uneven, probably because of the little twist on the yarn itself. And I think I have washed and blocked this, and it won't get those like unevenness on the fabric away. and I'm a bit sad with it, but I think that is just sunken cost. So I think if I keep knitting with this yarn to finish the whole cardigan, it won't look great, and I won't like the fabric, and I won't enjoy the garment. So I think I'm going to give up on these and maybe frog it if I have to, if I don't have enough yarn, and knit with this yarn with something else. And for the Amy Slipover pattern, it is like a light DK weight project. It is holding one strand of Sunday and one strand of tin silk mohair together on knitting on 3.5mm needles. And I just think that if I hold two strands of my grandma's yarn together, it will probably even out that whirliness in the yarn and make a stronger, better fabric. So I have swatched, and this swatch does look better. The stitches looks more even, the color is nice, and I tried two different needle sizes. I had to go down a needle size to 3.25mm needle to match the gauge, which was 23 stitches per 10 centimeters. And if you just compare this knitting with one strand on 2.5mm needle and knitting with two strands on 3.5 or 3.25mm needles, you can see that the fabric knitted holding two strands together looks much better. So I'm going to let these two painstakingly knitted fabric go. And now I'm casting this on, holding two strands together and knitting the Amy Slipover. This is the back panel. This is like mainly stockinette knitting, so I think I will probably just use this project as my bus knitting. I always have one project on the go for like commute or on the bus. Usually it is sock knitting, but now that I have finished knitting the sock and I don't have much more sock yarn left, so I will probably just keep this as my bus knitting project, as it's really simple and mindless. And I wanted to ask, have you encountered any of these sort of situations where you have spent a lot of effort on knitting something and you have knitted a lot, but then you decided that you have to frog it, or you are like having a hard time deciding whether you want to frog it or not? And frogging is frustrating and sad, but I think it is always better than finish knitting a whole garment and you don't want to wear it. So I think my philosophy would still be don't hold on to the sunken cost, just like the sunken cost sink, and let them go and reuse the yarn for something more beautiful, for a project that you would want to wear. And next I have sort of a design idea as well as a whip. Recently I have felt that there is like a trend on knitting those Icelandic round yoke sweater. I have seen Sam from the Irish Knitting Podcast knitting the Riddari from Lopi design. And I think that's a really beautiful design. And now that I'm starting on designing and feeling it was really enjoyable to do some designing, I wanted to treat every knitting opportunity as an opportunity to design something for my own. And I do have a design idea for such a round yoke Icelandic sweater, so I just go on with it. Also, previously I've said that I had another sweater design idea, which was using this stitch pattern from the hat and to knit like a cabled round yoke sweater. And the yarn for that sweater design has not arrived, and now I'm super pumped to do an Icelandic round yoke sweater design. So I think I will probably just work on that as my first sweater design. And I went to my local yarn shop and bought some Lopi yarn and starting to draw some colorwork chart and do some swatch. And these are what I got now. This is my swatch number 1. This is my swatch number 2. I'm not happy with either of them and I will keep improving, but probably I'm not going to swatch anymore, but instead I will just embroider little details on these. Let me talk about the inspiration for this sweater design. So I come from the northeastern part of China and my hometown is called Harbin, and it is really cold in the winter. It's very up in the north and east, very close to Russia. And my hometown had a nickname which is called Bingcheng, or literally translated to ice city. In winter there's usually a lot of like ice sculptures and snow sculptures around the town everywhere, and there are like little neon lights inside those ice sculptures. Those are really beautiful. And there is also a very famous building sculpture in my hometown called the Saint Sophia Church. Russian people built it many years before when they were here. There were actually a lot of European style like church or buildings in my hometown, and the Saint Sophia Church was one of them. And it's a really beautiful church, and especially in winter when the snows against it. It's actually not serving as a religious site anymore. It's just more like a museum, and when you go inside it there's just a lot of exhibition explaining the history of the church, and it looks more beautiful from the outside. And I'm sort of inspired by the color scheme that I see around the Saint Sophia Church, so I decided that the main color will be this blue, and there will be this heathered gray-white color for the snow. And then initially I went with these two colors for the Saint Sophia Church, for the church body, and the top of like the onion hat sort of dome on top of the building, as well as I can use the green to knit some other motifs, which will be like pine tree. And this is my first swatch. These are the pine leaves on top of snow. In my second version, I changed up the design a little bit. I made the pine needles a little bit smaller, but I think still the thicker version of the needle is better because it looks clearer, especially if you are looking them far away. This looks much with a better contrast. And then below that there will be some little snow on the Saint Sophia Church. I think there's still some work that need to be done to improve the contrast of the church. What I find with doing these swatches was that designing color work is really hard, and the more colors you have, the more difficult it gets. I'm making these as those like building and the windows on top of the church, and this is the little onion hat. And this is my second version. I make the onion hat a little bit bigger, but I think it's too big. And with this motif design, actually the white pop up more than the onion hat, and looking far away it looks as if the white shape is the main object and the green was sort of the background, and that's not my intention, so I have to improve. And also I swapped the brown color. A friend of mine said that this brown color might be too warm toned. She is sort of a makeup expert, so she had like 50 shades of brown for the eyeshadows or contours shades, so she's an expert on that. And she suggested that maybe using a cool toned brown would be more in harmonic with the other like cool toned colors that I had in the color work. So I went to the yarn shop and found a different shade of brown, and just by looking at these four colors, they are in more harmonic than like this, the top color. And for the colorway, the warm toned brown is called Rust, the cool toned brown is called Acorn, the blue is called Fir Blue, and the green is called lime grass, and the white is called feathered gray or something like that. And with the cool toned brown, I made the second swatch. But actually, compared against the warm toned brown, I actually find that the warm toned brown works better with the whole motif design, because just by looking at these, don't you think that this version, the blue, looks brighter, and this version, the blue, looks darker? It's as if the cool toned brown doesn't have enough contrast with the blue, and it's like muting the whole color work, whereas this color work just looks more cheerful and happier. So I think I will still go with my original color scheme. And this part is the ice bar that's drooping from like the top of the building. It's a very common thing in my hometown, where in winter after snow, there are like snow melting down from the ceiling, and the snow melt into ice bars, and there are a lot of long ice bars just hanging on the ceiling, and this is supposed to be the ice bar. And then there's the little like snow around those ice bars, and the ice bar is drooping little water droplets. So that's my sweater. I think I'll probably just call it Ice City Sweater if I ever manage to make that into a pattern. So this swatch also serves as my gauge swatch. For this one, I knitted with 4.5mm needle, and I think that's too tight. And then this, I knitted with 5.5mm needle, and I think that's too loose. So I think eventually I will just use the 5mm needle for the color work, and then 4.5mm needle for the single color section. And then my gauge will be 18 stitches per 10 centimeters, which is like the standard for the East-Tech Lopi yarn. Oh, did I say? These are the Lat Lopi yarn, which is the DK version of the Icelandic wool Lopi yarn. And for these swatches, I sticked as well. So I was knitting in the round for a wedge like this, and then I cut through here to form. Because first of all, knitting color work in the round is much easier and than knitting in the flat and purling. And secondly, I want to swatch the gauge for knitting in the round instead of like purling and color work in the round. And then third of all, I want to feel how the sticking is like with this yarn. This is very rustic woolen yarn, and you probably don't want to wear it against your skin. It's very scratchy. You probably need to wear a shirt or a long sleeve below that. But with it being so rustic, I know it's gonna be perfect for sticking. Although in my project, I don't think I will be doing any sticking. I'm just doing like a round yoke design. But it's nice to know, and it's nice to feel how sticking works for such a yarn. And you can see I cut it through here, and there's almost no unwrapping through this line. So in the future, if I ever want to, for example, adapt my design into a cardigan, I know there's nothing need to be fear about doing sticking with this yarn. It's really lovely and warm and water repellent, and I'm really looking forward to making my little design into a full sweater, and we'll see. So that's all the knitting projects that I have to show today. And now I'll talk about my 1000 giveaway. First, thank you all for sticking with me here for so long. And even if you're just joining in this episode, I really appreciate your support as well. So for the 1K giveaway, I have two things. The first thing is a little pouch, or what you call it in English. It's just a pouch where you can put your interchangeable needles or your little crochet hooks if you wish, and then you can wrap it around here. Just a little like tool pouch for you. I bought 2 of these from China a while ago. This is mine, and I use this to hold my crochet hook set. And I bought the other one thinking that I might want to put my needle in those, but I don't have interchangeable needles. I only have individual long circular needles, and they are really happy just staying in their original package. I wouldn't need this, but I think it looks really nice and it's really new and it's well made. So that's my giveaway gift number 1. And my giveaway gift number 2 hasn't arrived yet. I know it has arrived in Canada, in Vancouver, but it's still making its way towards my home. It will be a Chinese sock yarn that I knitted with this. Oh, I'll pop a picture of this yarn here. I have ordered this yarn before, and this is the Satisfaction from Love Yarn, or 知足 from 回归线 Company in Chinese. And this is a self-patterning sock yarn with 75% wool or something like that. And the rest are polyamide, the standard sock yarn. And I've knitted this sock with this yarn. It is this part. The yellow part is my contrasting color with sisu. I just think this self-patterning pattern is really lovely with all these green, blue, yellowish green dots colors, and I've ordered 2 balls of that as the giveaway, so together there will be 100 grams, which should give you 1 or 2 pairs of socks depending on how long you're going to knit with them. So I really don't know how you can order this yarn unless you are living in China or have some connection in China that can help you ordering things in Chinese. So I think that's kind of a special gift that I could offer to my audience. And it's really to my audience. So they will arrive in next week and I will be able to mail that to you. I'm giving the yarn and the little pouch away together as one package. And to enter this giveaway, just subscribe to this channel and comment on this episode below with some keyword giveaway. Just include the word giveaway. And maybe comment and let me know what kind of content that you enjoy watching me talking or would like me to talk more about in the future. Just so it's something that I can improve on to make my videos better or more interesting for you. And I will pick the winner in my next episode, which will come like after 2 to 3 weeks of the release of this episode. And I will just pick someone randomly among all the comments, including the keyword giveaway, and I will announce the winner in my next episode, and I will mail all these little gifts to you. So, and thank you again for sticking with me and listening to me talking about my knitting random thing creations and always being helpful, giving me tips and tricks sometimes. So if you enjoy this episode, please like, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, all those things to help me reach more knitters around the world. If any of the tips and tricks that I talked in this episode were helpful to you, please consider supporting me on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/seedlingstitch. You can make a one-time donation or you can become a monthly supporter, and I really appreciate all of you who have already donated on my Ko-fi page, and thank you for keeping me more financially supported and having more time to produce more knitting contents here. And to find me elsewhere, I'm on Instagram as SD_Athena, or just search for Seedling Stitch. I should pop up there. And I'm on Ravelry as Athena Liu. All my projects, designs, patterns are there on Ravelry. And just as a tradition of my little podcast, I always play a little bit of piano on my antique piano at the end of the episode, and I don't have a lot of time practicing piano, I'm sorry, so today I'm just going to play something really simple and something that fits the theme of this little bunny. So I'm going to play the Little Star theme by Mozart. It's like a very childish, cute, lovely song and simple to play for me, and I'm going to play that with the help of little LuLu. And thank you for watching. See you next time. Take care. Bye. of sewing threads. I held 3 strands of sewing thread. I